What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, April 26, 2017. Let me jiggle the little connector here. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open and working. The number is 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we have a lot of stuff going on today. Today, the corporate media is finally starting to mention this Gotham Shield exercise. I got email from people, from the people who were living in the area saying that they hadn't heard anything. Now it's on their local media. Fox 5 in New York City just mentioned the exercise, which does make a lot of sense because otherwise you're going to have all kinds of people calling the police and swamping the 911 lines, wondering what's going on with all the military vehicles out there. So a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people are very nervous because of this tendency of these terror drills to turn into actual terror attacks, but so far nothing has gone bang. Now, yesterday, France came on out saying they have absolute proof that Assad used sarin gas in Idlib. And first of all, the big question is, why do they have samples when nobody's being allowed into the area? But France says they do. And their entire rationale is the sample of sarin that they have acquired supposedly from Idlib matches exactly the same sarin used in 2013, therefore we know it must be Assad. Actually, it's faulty logic because Assad didn't do the 2013 or the 2014 attacks. The UN chemical weapons inspectors said it was the rebels. The French are out there saying, well, we know it was Assad in 2013 and this is more of the same stuff, so it had to be him. And again, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again seems to be the motto of all these governments and corporate media. And they're just trying to find something that's going to get traction and get the general public back on board the war wagon. But they're not having a lot of luck. In fact, I noticed a lot of people are saying this claim that Assad gassed his own people at Idlib does not make any sense. You know, he was winning. Their peace talks were going to allow him to stay in power. Why would he use chemical weapons against a militarily unimportant target? And so I actually saw an article came on out and said, well, really, it's Assad's way of terrorizing his own population to remind them what happens if they side with the rebels. And again, it's bogus thinking. None of the Syrian people are siding with the rebels. Most of them are from outside Syria. 95% of the Free Syria Army are not from Syria. They're hired mercenaries from elsewhere. So again, they're just throwing this stuff out, trying to get you to believe as you're supposed to believe here, because after all, this is the post-truth society, and reality and facts don't matter anymore. It's just what we can get you to believe and what you perceive as all that you need to decide on. Now, right now, apparently, Syria has accomplished complete military control over Palmyra, and apparently the U.S.-backed rebels have suffered serious damage. One of the real tragedies of this whole war in Syria is the destruction of some of these antiquities, like the Temple of Baal. It's just been absolutely torn to the ground and just erasing that history. So it's a real tragedy. Okay, let's take our first phone call. Bob in Indiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I would like to talk a little bit about the Constitution.
Okay.
This has been bothering me for a while. In our high schools and our universities, they have classes called American History. And those classes have a textbook, and in the back of the textbook there's a printed Constitution. My question is this printed Constitution, word for word, letter for letter, the same as the Constitution put together in the 1780s?
Well, without looking at the actual textbook, I can't tell you, but one area that we know there's a difference, there was, before the present 13th Amendment, there was another 13th Amendment, the Foreign Emoluments Clause, I think it was called, and we know that there's been some revisions to the Constitution here and there over the years. But the only way to know for sure is to go to the National Archives website, where you can actually see a scan of the original handwritten Constitution, or the official printed release of the Constitution that was issued at the time, and you can then compare it to what's in the back of the textbook. I do know, I've heard from a lot of parents and educators that what is in the Common Core curriculum for American history is drastically changed from what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights actually says. I don't even know if they have the Constitution and Bill of Rights in these textbooks. Out of concern, somebody might go and check for themselves. But there's definitely, obviously, an effort by the federal government to render the Constitution and the Bill of Rights null and void or impotent. George Bush was always talking about it being a blankety-blank piece of paper, and we certainly know that NSA, FBI, CIA have absolutely no respect for the Fourth Amendment, or the Fifth Amendment, or the Ninth Amendment, or the Tenth Amendment. And now, of course, we're seeing this intense attack on freedom of speech. The corporate media screaming that we're all fake news out here. Everybody's getting angry when we start telling the truth in an age that's supposed to be controlled by lies. So it's really worth it to check for yourself. And by the way, you should all read the Constitution yourself. That is the original contract with America, and you should read it and know it, so that you can have an educated opinion when somebody comes up and says, well, the Constitution says this and the Constitution says that. And there are pocket versions of it available. I have one right here. This was actually being given out by InfoWars. And it has the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, jury rights, and these are really very useful to have, very compact, very portable. They're from Free Speech Systems, LLC in Austin, Texas, and you can get reprints of these at Infowars.com. It's well worth having.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here, we are getting more reports from the Russian forces that ISIS formations near Hama and Homs have been totally decimated, totally defeated. So Syria and Russia have regained the initiative inside Syria, despite Donald Trump's cruise missile attack, which was really quite ineffectual in the military sense. Now, of course, we're getting this word that Turkey is starting to wade on in. And even some questions about whether Israel, which has already been bombing Syria, if they might actually actively get more involved there. Because that whole Syria agenda is on the verge of collapse. It was just before that Idlib gas attack. The whole Syria agenda was just on the verge of being a write-off. And wow, how lucky for the anti-Assad people that Assad went out and supposedly gassed his own people at Idlib. But again, the story never made sense. He had no motive to do it. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. The gas attack helped the United States war machine. It helped the rebels. It gave the corporate media something to demonize him with. And, of course, the corporate media right now, they're demonizing everybody around the globe. And I keep getting all these emails about, oh, this Kim Jong-un, these crazy things he's saying. So, well, we're not sure he's saying them. Because everything we think we know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un was given to us by the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. And we know that when Ahmadinejad was running Iran, they deliberately misquoted him. In a presentation, he was saying that Israel will eventually vanish from the pages of history, which is a very passive comment. And it was mistranslated into Iran will wipe Israel off the face of the earth, which put a whole different context. And it was a deliberate misquote to make Ahmadinejad look bad. And we can assume that the same thing is being done to make Kim Jong-un look crazy, look evil. And it's amazing, in what is supposed to be a politically correct, tolerant society, the personal attacks on the basis of his weight and his hair, it's degenerated down to name calling. Now then, interestingly enough, getting back to that issue about what is Israel is going to do, Netanyahu has come on out and said that the Golan Heights belongs to Israel, and Israel is going to stay there until the rest of the world accepts that the Golan Heights and all that oil and gas underneath it belongs to Israel, not Syria. So That's Israel's idea of peace in the Middle East. They want this piece of the Middle East, and they want that piece of the Middle East, and they want that piece of the Middle East over there here. Cautionary article coming out of Activist Post. Trump's aggressions in Syria will have long-term consequences. And all of these interventions have long-term consequences. But nobody ever thinks in the long term. There's always the immediate gain. And I'll give you a good example. The overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in 1953 and the imposition of the Shah. And it got oil, petroleum, raw petroleum, to American and British oil companies at lowered prices, which is what they wanted, but it ultimately led to the 1979 revolution and the hostility with Iran ever since. The same thing with Cuba. The U.S. went on in and installed Batista as a dictator over Cuba so that PepsiCo and United Fruit could get agricultural products from Cuba at below market prices to maximize their profits. That in turn led to the Castro Revolution. Same thing in Chile, same thing in all these interventions. There's always a short-term economic advantage to be had, and then they all of a sudden realize in the long term, there's going to be a backlash. And it always, always happens. And the way our foreign policy is being conducted now, they're clearly not thinking in the long term. By the way, they've changed the agenda in Syria yet again. We're back to the idea of safe zones. We've been down this entirely. Sometimes I think they've got one of those spinning wheels the gamblers use. You know, you just spin it and it goes. What are we going to say about Syria today? Assad is a tyrant. We need a humanitarian intervention. He's gassing his own people. He's got weapons of mass destruction. And we're not actually after Assad. We're after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Then we're back after Assad. He's gassing his people again. And now we're going to have the plan for the safe zones to carve Syria up into little tiny pieces. And it almost makes me want to call up the White House and say, let's call off all the war in Syria until you actually decide what it is you're trying to accomplish over there. And, of course, we know what they're trying to accomplish over there. They can't admit it to the American people. They want Assad out. They want a puppet ruler in. Most Americans are not going to sacrifice their children for something like that. So, Turkey has just started airstrikes into northeast Syria. That's definitely away from some of the other war zones and back into that whole Kurdistan area. Now, the U.S. State Department is saying that Turkey cannot fight the Kurdistan People's Party at the expense of the anti-ISIS fight. And what the State Department is trying to do is to get Turkey to go easy on the Kurds because the Kurds are helping the U.S. against Assad. And that's always the problems with a three-party war. When you have a war where there's two sides that know who they are, the British and the colonials, things are easy to understand. When you have Turkey in there with their particular agenda, and you have the U.S. in there with their agenda, and you have Syria with their agenda, we have Turkey who's like helping on one side and harming on the other. And we're even seeing that with the United States, that are actually fighting against ISIS and Al-Qaeda over in the Kurdish areas, at the same time helping ISIS and Al-Qaeda against Assad up there in the north. Meanwhile, things are not getting any better over in Yemen. Article coming out of the independent Great Britain, the war is tearing apart the ancient country's social fabric. There are more than 10,000 dead, 19 million people in desperate need of basic humanitarian aid, including 7.3 million on the brink of famine because of the Saudi blockade of the harbors. The figures in Saudi Arabia's 2-year-old war are staggering. Now, interestingly enough, the Independent is saying it's a civil war. No, it isn't. The U.S. intervened, kicked out Yemen's elected government, imposed puppet rulers. The people of Yemen didn't want a puppet ruler. They're trying to kick the puppet rulers out. And the U.S. has sent Saudi Arabia in to slap them around and say, yes, you will accept your puppet rulers. That's what's really going on over in Yemen. It's not really a civil war. It's most accurately, it's a counter-coup d'etat. All right, let's grab another phone call. Wes in Idaho, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Do you know the difference between a milk cow and the Holocaust?
Oh, come on. I don't want to do Holocaust jokes on the show. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so what's on your mind? What's on your mind?
I met Michael Hoffman in a health food store in Coeur d'Alene yesterday, the famous author, you know, I was speaking about there.
Yes.
And, we got to talking about things, and one of the things we got to talking about what was in my grocery basket. I mentioned that there's a 117-year-old woman in Italy, and she said that she ate very little vegetables and fruits her whole life. And I wanted to get that across to you earlier. I brought up a couple of months ago, Viljamer Stephenson. It's on the internet. He was the Arctic explorer. He's on the 22-cent postal stamp, which is, we got to be recognized. Hey, that's even better better than being on front page of Newsweek or Time or Life. You're on a postage stamp. But anyway, his diet, he went out to the Arctic and he ate like an Eskimo, which meant caribou and fish. And he came back to the USA, and they figured he was going to be have scurvy and have plugged arteries from all the saturated fat. But upon testing his health, they found him in fine health. In fact, about 15 years later, they put him in an observed study in which he was fed nothing but meat for a year at Bellevue Hospital in New York. One of the men that...
Okay, Wes, if I could interrupt here because we're almost on a commercial break here. The 117-year-old woman has just passed away, but 117, you can't really sneeze at that situation. And, her advice was that, she ate meat, didn't really do a lot of vegetables or fruits, and basically ignored doctor's advice. And what you need to understand is that a lot of the dietary advice that we are given in this country is less about health and more about available supplies and sources and maximizing profitability. One of the big reasons for the push toward vegetarianism is that you can feed people for a lot less money. It costs less to just have vegetables and get them to the store as opposed to dealing with the meat animals. They're a lot more trouble and it's a lot more costly. And it's mostly being driven by the economics than by the actual health concerns. But they can't say, we want you to eat this instead of that because we want to make more money. So they'll come up with some kind of a ginned-up study that says, oh, this is bad for you and you should be eating more of this. And it's amazing when you read the commodities reports and you see where there's a surplus and where there's a shortage, you can almost predict the health advice that you're going to be getting in the coming months to steer you toward the ample supply of something that can be sold at a reasonable profit. But it may not be absolutely what's best for you because the concern really is the economics of the food supply chain.
Fertility is another dynamic involved. They've known that people on a vegetarian diet have less fertility. It's been known for years. Put them on the Coliseum, bread and entertainment. Is that what they go for? Pizza. The dynamic involved with grains is that it boosts up your glucose rate.
Okay,
more than sugar.
Wes, we're going to have to let you go. I'm sorry, we've hit the commercial break here, and thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as if the world didn't have enough potential flashpoints for Armageddon, apparently the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama is threatening war if Kosovo is denied entry into the European Union. And apparently, Prime Minister Rama said Europe would face a nightmare if the Balkans go crazy because EU accession is off the agenda, with the region becoming a gray zone in which other actors have more influence than the European Union. In other words, he's hinting a pivot toward Russia. It just is getting crazy. All right, another phone call. Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How you doing today?
Doing all right.
Okay. I've fallen off the Trump bandwagon a while back, and I'm not sorry that I'm off of it. Okay, we had Jeff Sessions coming out saying that we've got to prosecute criminally WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. We've had John Huntsman, a never-Trumper from Utah, being appointed ambassador to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Ivanka Trump. I saw her on the news yesterday, seated with Angela Merkel and Christine Lagarde. Okay, and today she was quoted as saying we must accept these refugees into the country. What the heck is going on?
Well, the American people voted for a new direction for the country, and I'm afraid what we bought is just an empty wrapper. And I can imagine a lot of people are just as frustrated about that as I am. We're not getting the change in direction we voted for. We've been cheated. And I'm no longer supportive of Trump. I still think it would have been worse or situation accelerating more rapidly with Hillary there. But to say that I'm disappointed in Donald Trump would be an understatement. And interestingly enough, we had that one guy calling yesterday saying, well, Trump's doing great. At least he's doing the immigration thing. He's getting the wall. Well, it looks like Trump's going to cave on the wall as well. So we're not getting the government we voted for. We have been shortchanged. And again, it's a repeating pattern. And it shows us that whoever's in the Oval Office isn't really the power in this country. All of the evils that we're seeing before us, it is systemic. It is within that deep state. It's within that network of ultra-rich, ultra-powerful people, the untouchables. And I'm disappointed in Trump. I was hoping he would have at least a little more spine.
Meeting here with the 100 senators at the White House.
I think we're going to be at war with North Korea by the weekend because, they're out there saying North Korea is going to attack Australia. Now, all of a sudden, they've decided the Taipodong 3 can actually reach the continental United States. They're really ramping it up. They're laying it on with the Bex howitzer to try and get everybody all hot and bothered for the next war.
Yeah. Sad.
It's tragic. It's more than sad. It's dangerous. And again, I don't think they can keep this under control. If you look at how badly managed the wars to date have been, they're not going to be able to keep this under control. At some point, you're going to see the rest of the world that is not already controlled by the United States, they're going to pull together and say, we draw the line here. We don't want a one-world government, certainly not one that treats its own population as badly as the U.S. government treats us.
Okay. Well, keep up the good work, Mike.
Just as long as I can.
All right. Yeah, likewise.
All right. Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much here. All right. I'm going to hold off on the next call until after this coming commercial break. And apparently Netanyahu has put a real hammer into German-Israeli relations because the day after Holocaust Remembrance Day, Netanyahu canceled a meeting with visiting German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel because he wanted to meet with the NGO Breaking the Silence, which is talking about Israel's humanitarian crimes against the Palestinians. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, story just now coming out from TASS. Basically, North Korea's mission at the United Nations is saying North Korea neither fears war nor wants to avoid it. And remember yesterday I made the observation that when the U.S. was developing its nuclear arsenal, even after successfully bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the U.S. continued testing, therefore that we should not construe North Korea's testing of nuclear weapons as precluding that they don't already have something deployable. And so getting back to this TASS article, one line in there is really raising the hairs on the back of my neck. The mission reminded that North Korea, quote, had access to a powerful nuclear deterrent to protect itself from the U.S. nuclear threat, end quote. In other words, they're implying that, yes, North Korea already has a fieldable nuclear weapon. And I don't like all the chest thumping, but it's going to spin out of control. It is absolutely going to spin out of control. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was listening to Lee Stranahan, and as you know, he was with Breitbart for 7 years, and he's kind of out now. I think he's with Sputnik. He's got a show starting up. But he basically was saying, we have to get Ivanka Trump out of the White House. This is the number one priority. Now, he's saying it's time to hit the streets. We can't wait. We have to get Ivanka out. And then kind of in the same vein, there was an economist suggesting that what Trump is doing with Korea is distinguishing his administration from Obama's by dealing, putting Korea on the front burner and setting a tone that we're not going to play games for the next 4 years through his administration. He's going to treat them with a hard hand and then back off a bit and maybe send them a boatload of rice or something of that nature. But as far as I can tell, this is a lot of kabuki theater based on a photograph I've seen with Jenna Bush sitting with Huma Abedin and Ariana Huffington. I mean, these people are supposedly diametrically opposed, and yet they're sitting here having a brunch in. It just seems like kabuki theater now.
Well, there's a lot of theater going on, and a lot of celebrities dream of being politicians, and some politicians have actually become actors, like Fred Thompson. So there is a lot of overlap in that area. As far as Ivanka, again, the concern is not so much Ivanka herself, but her husband and his alliances. Frankly, Donald Trump has allowed his entire White House to be hijacked by the neocons. And again, we, the American people, we voted for a significant change of direction in this country, and all we got was an empty wrapper. And again, we saw that in past elections. But I'm very alarmed at the recklessness with which the foreign policy is being handled right now, where everybody is just out there with groupthink, magical thinking. If we act tough enough, they'll back down. And at some point, somebody's going to push back. Even if they're overshadowed and outnumbered, they're going to be desperate enough to just try and strike back. And somebody might just get lucky. And it was rather interesting. Somebody put up an article about what can happen to large armadas and how the loss of them can actually destroy the myth of a nation's invincibility. And they were talking about another incident that occurred in that part of the world involving a naval encounter that ended badly for the superior force. And, of course, we all remember the ignoble ending of the Spanish Armada. And if this is hypothetical, if North Korea were able to go on out and sink the Carl Vinson, the damage would not just be to the Carl Vinson and, sadly, its crew, or even the auxiliary ships. It really would change the world's opinion of just how actually effective the U.S. military might be. Now, right now,
perception is everything.
Yeah, perception is everything. The U.S. has a good track record going up against countries that have no real military with which to fight back. But we have yet to see what our current military is going to do against a peer adversary. And from what we keep hearing about the failure of our weapon systems, I don't think it's all that good. And again, the carrier groups themselves are a very visual display of power projection, but naval experts consider them archaic, a holdover from World War II, and very vulnerable to the latest generation of anti-ship weapons that are being developed specifically to go after the carriers and can be deployed from the new generation of stealth submarines, which the U.S. is having a very, very hard time being able to detect.
I think if you want to destroy the West, they're playing their hand perfectly, meaning I don't like the term the deep state. I'm just going to say the Zionist bankers that want to destroy the West. They've got us spread so far thin, and now they're going to start throwing billions of dollars are being proposed to be spent in Afghanistan. Are you kidding me? What, are they going to move some more rocks around? This is the downfall of the United States, and we're watching it. I think it's time to hit the streets, Mike. We got to get with the left and just freaking get in front of Trump's face and say, we are not taking this. I mean, it's time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's time for the American people to start screaming bloody murder about the direction this nation is on, because this isn't abstract anymore. We're talking about actually getting into a world war that we are going to lose, and I do not want to see that happen. Certainly, the fact that we can't control Afghanistan. I'm sure that Putin is laughing his head off because the U.S. is being harmed by Afghanistan to the same extent the former Soviet Union was. Historians look at the Soviets' defeat in Afghanistan as ending the Soviet myth of invincibility, and that in turn led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. And we're seeing the same thing playing out in reverse now. Okay?
Yeah, Mike, I'm telling you, I've been very discouraged, and I'm ready to hit the streets. We have to get with the left and just make this thing untenable. We can't sit back anymore. I love your show, but I'm ready to get on the streets and just block traffic or whatever these tactics are that just stop this machine from rolling forward. These damn bankers, they're satanic devils, and they are going to, carve our hearts out. It's so insane now. I can't take it anymore. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot there, and we're going to switch over to Billy in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Billy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Aloha, buddy.
Aloha. Nui nui.
I was trying to get you to smile, man. That's so weird, the caller that just called, because I had a comment to make, being a long-time listener of your show. I watch you and Alex Jones a lot. I don't watch Alex that much anymore, but I watched you a lot. And I kind of came up with this. I mean, I'm not as smart as you, don't pretend to be, but great admirer of you and your show. But after analyzing everything in the broad perspective, I came up with a solution, but I don't see it happen in our lifetime. The four horsemen of the New World Order, shadow government, what do they call it, the deep state now or something?
Yes.
Is the Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Community Group, whatever you want to call them, and the private central banks. There's your four horsemen. There's your shadow government. And when the day finally comes, when black people, white people, Hispanics, Orientals all stop hating each other and stop looking at each other like you're the enemy, I can't stand you, whatever, middle class, lower class, when all Americans stop looking at each other with this divide and conquer thing that they have developed against us, right wing, left wing, when everybody cuts it out and just says, man, we are being steamrolled here. They have to get together. Millions of people have to get into the streets and put a stop to this. And then when that happens, maybe, just maybe, because we're not going to have it happen in our own government. I just don't see it ever happening. When Russia, China, Japan, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, all these countries that have seen and have proof of what we have done in the past and are still doing now, not only to our own people, but as far as our past goes with our invading other countries, Libya, assassinating dictators and replacing them, overthrowing, destabilizing with this George Soros crap and everything. Maybe they can hold the United States and George Soros accountable for crimes against humanity. Because it's going to get to the point to where, like you said, brother, they're going to start pressing buttons and then it's not going to matter anymore. It's going to be so bad. It's going to be too late, man. It's time that people get in the streets and just, you know, even if it just says, wake up America, something. People have to get together and stop all this divide and conquer stuff. We have to get together and put a stop to these vampires.
Yeah, we absolutely do, and that's why when I was talking about the blueprint for the new America, rule number 1 is going to be no more private central banks, because they are a system of enslavement and looting and plundering. The private central banks do not serve the nation. They do not serve the people of the nation. They serve themselves. And they succeed because the rulers of nations are very easy to corrupt. As Aaron Russo used to say, your average politician would sell their own mother for $1. And it's absolutely right.
There's a guy up in Canada who's a politician. There's a guy in Canada, a politician up in Canada, and he wrote a book called Money Mafia.
Yes,
and it pretty much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and he maps everything out. He actually was inside the government and knows the inside scoop. Same things that you and I are aware of, and you're much more knowledgeable than I'll ever be, but I'm just saying that it's to the point to where, you know, your everyday common Joe who listens to the right side of the media now is aware of how terrible these organizations are, and it all comes down to those 4 entities: Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg, and the private central banks. They're all tied in together for the globalist agenda, and they want us to be their slaves, not just the interest slaves, but a lot worse than that, man.
I think there are
People
more.
have to stop the hate.
I think you do. That we've got to stop falling for this divide and conquer nonsense. But I think there are more players than just the 4. I mean, it's nice to try and fit them into the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But, I mean, you've got ultra-rich people, as you mentioned, George Soros, Sheldon Adelson, even Bill Gates, who seem to feel being that rich gives them a right to play with the planet and its people like personal toys. There are a lot of players, and it's basically this ad hoc network of the ultra-rich, ultra-powerful, who have just bought their way or blackmailed their way to control of all of these various governments. And again, the speed with which Donald Trump got brought to heel gives us an idea of just how powerful these things are. Anyway, listen, Billy, phone lines are loading up here.
Can I say one more thing?
One more thing.
I really hate to say it because I was a long-time supporter of Trump, but when he started out with firing General Flynn, and now, you know, with Bannon, and now this stuff his daughter's putting out about letting all these Syrian immigrants in, the Trojan horse that Trump warned us about might be what Mitt Romney said. He's a con man. He might have conned us the whole time, man. I'm sorry to say it, but I'm starting to feel like I got conned. You know, God bless you, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, thank you for waiting so patiently. What is on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to again point out where all these places coincide, and start out by saying that the 100th of 1% that run the world, and what are the numbers where, you know, like the top 60 or 200 families or whatever it is have controlled the wealth of 2/3 of the world or something.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty amazing.
It's the banks. It's the banks is where it all flows from. The banks own the corporations. The banks finance the corporations. The banks certainly own the government. The banks own the media. Look who our foreign policy. Look who the banks are. Look who the people Soros and Adelson and Haim Saban, and look who all these people are. Look who they are. and now we have Ivanka Trump and this Kushner guy who seems to be the tumor, the malignant tumor inside this administration, if there's point to any one, but it all comes down to one. All these things, the federal government, the banks, federal government, the media, the military, they all, they all come down because, for instance, like our foreign policy is basically dictated by Israel or somebody who's got their interests, but they all are agents, they're the operations. They carry out the will of the banks, and look who the banks are.
Yes.
So everything's there just to carry out the will. So you can talk about all these different power centers, military, industrial, climate, deep space, state, and all that stuff. They all are there as organs, just organs, to be operated and manipulated by the banks, and you know who they are.
Well, the scary part of it is that the global financial system is starting to appear to almost be operating outside human control. I mean, these owners of the banks and everything, they'll sit at the top and then they'll imagine they're still calling the shots, but so much of it is now automated. I think it's spinning out of control and becoming naturally unstable, and sooner or later it is going to result in somebody crossing that line and turning that key. Anyway, Peter, we got to let you go.
Can I make one more thing?
Stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after this commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Peter, you wanted to finish up with one more idea.
Yeah, and that's this, Mike. That the private central bankers, and we all know who they are. I mean, let's be real. We know who they are, but they can inflate any bubble and make money up on the inflating of the bubble, and deflate it because they know it's coming, and make money on the way down. They can do a press run and print in 5 seconds. They can print enough money to pay off any politician or newspaper person or media personality in the world. Not that they're not already owned anyways, and they're totally unaudited. And then you have you wonder why our foreign policy is the way it is. Well, you know, we've been sharing all these intercepts, everything that the CIA and the DIA and the NSA, all these surveillance intercepts in raw data goes to Israel. So how do we have a foreign policy that keeps us out of war and serves our interests? How do we have a democracy with an institution like the Federal Reserve? How does it possibly coexist? How can you have a country with those two things going on?
Well, you really can't. And, you know, the Federal Reserve is a supreme authority, if not the supreme authority. We even have a video of Alan Greenspan admitting the Federal Reserve answers to no federal government agency. They are a law unto themselves. And you're right. They will manipulate the economy to their own benefit. And a little bit of a history of the Federal Reserve. It was a really sweet deal. Do you know the Federal Reserve does not pay any taxes on all the money they're making from the American people? It's right in the charter for the Federal Reserve. The only taxes they pay are the property taxes on the ground underneath their various bank buildings, and that's it. They don't pay any other taxes. And when the Federal Reserve was proposed, it was supposed to be this bank that anybody could invest in and own a part of, but as soon as the charter was signed, the plotters behind the Federal Reserve simply created enough money to loan to themselves to buy all the shares of the Federal Reserve. And it was another little bit of a scam that they did. And you're right, this constant cycle of inflation and deflation, it's a giant heartbeat that pumps the real assets of the people to the pockets of the bankers. And they've been playing this scam on the human race for 300 years, and they get away with it because politicians are just as greedy as the bankers are.
And Mike, when you take all that into consideration, it's laughable. It's a joke to even consider the United States of America as its own country.
Yeah.
Really is.
Okay. Well, listen, Peter, we're going to let you go, and I've got 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines here, but I'm going to hold till after our station break. Meanwhile, some very alarming stories coming on out. The USS Carl Vinson carrier is now within striking range of North Korea. And now we have this article from Zero Hedge where Tillerson, Mattis, and Coates are calling North Korea urgent national security threat, and we must be prepared to act. We'll be right back after station identification.